Hi everyone, and welcome to this Multilingual Matters event where we answer your questions about publishing. I'm Flo, and I'm joined by my expert colleagues Anna Roderick and Tommi Grover. Anna's our editorial director and Tommi is our managing director. And the idea of today's event was to give new authors and more experienced ones with questions the chance to pick our brains about all things academic publishing. So to kick us off, Tommi, for anyone who's not familiar with us, can you give a brief introduction to the company?
Welcome everyone. It's a pleasure to be talking to you from Bristol, England. We are a small academic publishing company that is entirely family and staff owned, and we publish only books, no journals, on the topics of multilingualism, applied linguistics, education and tourism studies.
Thanks, Tommi. So loads of you submitted questions to us, which is really great. Thanks for doing that. And by far the most popular questions were about whether we publish PhD theses and what the process involves and everything to do with that. So I will hand over to Anna and she'll give you some answers to some of the questions that you asked on that subject.
Great. So also a pleasure to be doing this, and thank you all for joining us. The short answer is yes, we do. I had a quick look through our books that we have currently in the publication process, and in the next 9 months I think we'll be publishing 5 books that originated from PhD theses. So they make up a relatively significant minority of our publications. There are publishers that will just essentially print out your thesis, put a cover on it and sell 2 or 3 copies. We're not really interested in doing that. 1, it's not really publishing, and 2, it's not very interesting for us, and 3, there's little point in doing that if really only 3 or 4 people are going to get access to your work that way. So we do publish books based on theses, but the key point there is that they have to be books. We're not just reprinting your thesis. So it's really helpful from our point of view if you think you will want to publish a book based on your thesis, that you start thinking about that process. I mean, if you can start doing it thinking about it while you're doing your research, that's brilliant. Otherwise, when you get to the point of writing up your thesis, if your university is happy for you to write your thesis in such a way that it's more similar to a book, then that's great for you, as it spares you quite a lot of work further down the line. If you've got to the point of having written and perhaps defended your thesis, then you have to ask yourself a couple of key questions, I think. One, which is a really difficult question, and I think it's probably something that you need to get some input from your colleagues on, is there really a book in my thesis? Because there isn't a book in every thesis, and you'll save yourself a fair amount of heartache if you can have a real soul search, to be honest, about whether your research project would work as a book. They don't all. Some of them are much more suitable to lots of journal publications. Some of them you might need to do a bit more research, maybe combine 2 research projects together to make a book. So if you've got some trusted colleagues and advisors who can provide some input on that, that's really useful for you. If you kind of go through that process and you think, yes, actually, I do think there's value in this as a book publication, then I think the next step, and this is the really crucial point for us, is the difference in audience between your thesis and a book publication. When you're writing a thesis, you're demonstrating to 2 or 3 people who are going to be paid to read your thesis that you have read all the relevant literature, you understand your particular research methodology, you can apply it to a discrete couple of research questions, and you could write in this kind of academic style, and you can produce a reasonably long piece of writing in a reasonably timely fashion. You almost need to flip it on its head when you're thinking about a book proposal and come at it from completely the opposite way around, which is instead of 3 people who are paid to read your work, it's how can I persuade people to pay €30, €40, €50 to read my work? What is it about my work that will make people prepared to spend that money themselves, or recommend it on their course, or ask their university library to buy it? And once you've identified that aspect of your research, then that trickles down to thinking about, what does your book need to have in it? What can you take out of your thesis? Not just to sell our books, but a really good way of doing this is to look at some books that started out as thesis. And if you get in touch with me, my email address will come up at the end. I'm happy to recommend a couple of books that have done that transition really well. And you'll be able to see that they've almost always completely dispensed with that kind of introduction, literature review, research methods. Here's my data, here's a conclusion and a couple of suggestions for where research might go next. So you need to sit down and have a really hard look at your thesis and think, right, what's interesting about this for people who don't necessarily have any interest in my particular research context? How can I make it speak to wider debates in the field? Have a look at what we and other publishers are publishing books about at the moment. It's the general way of things that, you know, there are hot topics, we all know this. Does your book speak to these hot topics? Does your book perhaps speak to what the hot topic will be in 2 or 3 years' time, which is the really crucial thing? And so you might dispense almost entirely with your literature review and your research methodology section, bring aspects of those in throughout the data chapters, but really, you know, you might have a chapter focusing on one particular research question, then another chapter focusing on another research question, and obviously some elements of the literature review will come in each of those chapters, but you don't need that big chunk of yes, I've read lots of books and I understand my research methodology at the start, because that's a way of putting off potential readers of your book, basically. We have, and again, if you get in touch with me, I can email you. We have guides of the things you need to be thinking about, how to go about this. And we'll come on to this later, because there were lots of questions about talking to publishers and working with publishers. That a key part of my job and of the rest of our commissioning editor's job is working with new authors. So please do get in touch with me and ask me questions, and, you know, send me your thesis if you want to, and I will have a quick look at it and say, yes, you know, the topic is definitely of interest, but, you know, you need now to read these guidelines that we have and have a think about making it into a book. I think that covers about all of the questions that were in that section, but please do type any further questions about that into the chat, and we'll try and get around to them if we can.
Thank you, Anna. Exhaustive. So this question was, the next question was, to what extent can PhD students seek both journal article publications and also compile the data for a book at the same time?
Yes, so this is a really difficult question, and I think for junior and early career researchers, it's really hard, because unlike with, say, plagiarism, there's no hard and fast definition of what's acceptable with regards to slicing your work up and publishing it. I had a quick look this morning, and still some of the organisations that deal with publication ethics don't actually provide a definition of what's okay for this, and it's very much on a continuum between this is definitely not okay and here is my book, it contains my research project, I've never published any of this before. We recognise that there's a huge pressure to publish for academics at the moment, and particularly junior researchers who need those publications for their career. Some book publishers, and I'm going to come at this from the perspective of a book publisher because that's what we are, and I'm certainly not an expert on journal publishing. from some book publishers will give you a, you'll submit a book proposal and they'll say, right, we have a rule that only 15–20% of the word count of your book can have been previously published. We don't do that because I think that that's a bit of a nonsense, to be honest, because it's kind of, which 15%? If you're talking about the 15% that's the really crucial data in your book, then that's a bit of a problem. But if you're in most of the material in your introduction has previously been published, for example, that's a lot less of a problem. So I think we'd rather deal with it on a case-by-case basis. What I would say is that the really important thing for us is that your book does something that the reader couldn't get by just finding your journal publications and reading them one after another. So you need to obviously present some additional information, some research, some data that isn't already published, but you also need to be making an argument in your book that the reader couldn't just get from finding the 2 or 3 journal publications you've done. And I think that's a crucial point about book publishing in general, not just this question, that is a book the appropriate format to publish your research? And the point of a book, as opposed to 5 or 6 journal articles, is that it makes a bigger argument, a big kind of overarching argument that you can't do in a stream of journal papers. So that's my answer. It's an answer. There are some more or less helpful sources of information I can point people to if they're interested. Unfortunately, a lot of the really good ones deal with massive medical research projects with huge numbers of cohorts involved in it. And of course, then it's much easier to talk about separating things up than it is with a relatively small scale ethnography, for example. But I'm very happy to send anyone who's interested those. But I can't give you a definite answer, unfortunately.
Thanks, Anna. Then we had a whole bunch of questions about making initial contact and working with publishers as well. A common one was just kind of how to start the publishing process, trying to get in touch with an editor and not getting any response, where to begin, that kind of thing. Can you speak a bit about that?
Yeah, so I'm really sorry, anyone. I hope the people who've had there was one person in particular, I think, who mentioned not getting a response. I hope that wasn't with us, because we always respond. So I think that obviously there have been multiple downsides of this whole pandemic situation for all of us. But from a publishing and an editorial perspective, one of the real downsides is that one of our main ways of being approachable and people being able to make contact with us is at conferences. And that's kind of a nice, relatively informal way of making contact with an editor. You can kind of walk past the book stand a couple of times and, suss us out and see if we look approachable, and do it when there's no one else around and that kind of thing. And obviously that's completely not an option at the moment. On the other hand, it has made us think more carefully about how we can be more accessible to people who perhaps can't get to academic conferences that much. And this is one of the ways that we're trying to make up for that. What I would say is that please do get in touch with me. I think maybe sometimes, particularly if you've not published much, you see me and commissioning editors at publishing companies as gatekeepers, and that our job is to say no to things and to tell you that we don't want to do things. Whereas certainly for me and for my colleagues here, I would say it's completely the opposite way around. And my job, as I see it, is to support people and encourage them and facilitate them and make things clearer. So email us for a start, please. As I said, my email address will come up. I I'm doing 2 or 3 Zooms a week at the moment, I think, with people who have just finished their PhD or in the process of it, just to talk about how the process works, to answer their questions. So please do take me up on that. And I'm very happy to, you don't have to have a book proposal ready. You don't have to have finished your PhD thesis yet. I spoke to someone last week who's only just finished doing her research, actually, is about to start writing. You can come with a pretty speculative idea of what you think you might want to do, and that's absolutely fine. And I'm very happy to provide input at every stage along the process. The one thing I would say is that obviously we get you to fill in a book proposal, which is fine, and it's kind of factual and it gives me all the information that I need, but it's really hard to get across in a book proposal why you're passionate about your research, and it's quite a dry, formal document. And so if I can't talk to you in person at a conference at the moment, Zoom is unfortunately the next best thing, just for me to get an understanding of why you think your research matters, why I might want to invest our time and energy in publishing your research. So please do approach us. I hope that everyone who works for us is very approachable and very happy to chat and answer questions. And to be honest, everyone I know who works for academic publishing companies is in it because they enjoy meeting people and talking to people and talking about ideas and books. And it's something that we're all missing at the moment. So we'll probably, you know, fall over ourselves to set up Zoom meetings with you.
Thanks, Anna. You've sort of touched on this, but if someone asks what they should prepare in advance before contacting the publisher to get published, and obviously that involves the book proposal process. I don't know if you want to say a bit about what they need to have ready to put in there.
Yeah, so I mean, I think, as I said, I'm very happy to discuss kind of initial ideas before a book proposal. Every publisher will have their own book proposal form, and so one top tip is to use the publisher that you're approaching's book proposal form, because it makes us feel special ultimately. When you get to that stage, you need to be proposing the book rather than your thesis, with a promise that you will turn it into a book, which is one of the reasons that it's good to try and talk to us before you get to that stage, is that we can give you any feedback on your ideas before you get to the book proposal. If you're looking at edited books, you need to have approached potential contributors really for us before we can consider your proposal. I can kind of say, yeah, you know, it's an interesting topic, and if you can get those people who are on your kind of wish list to write chapters, that's great. But we can't really give you any commitment without confirmed contributors.
Great, thanks. And there was one more question in this sort of section, asking if it's possible to get feedback on draft proposals.
Yes, very much so. I'm aware again that when you press send on that book proposal, it feels like a very sort of final moment, I guess, that this is the point where you're either going to get a yes or a no. And that's a bit of a misconception itself, because I'd say 50% of the time we probably come back initially with a maybe. So it's not kind of the final moment, but yes, I'm again very, very happy to read through people's draft proposals. So sometimes people just don't even send me a draft proposal, they just send me, you know, an A4 side of writing, and I just read through that and say, yeah, you know, when you're writing a proposal, please expand that bit, and you don't need to tell me that bit, for example. But yes, and you know, sometimes I do it 2 or 3 times before it gets to an editorial meeting, where I'll then discuss it with Tommi and Flo and our colleagues. So yes, it's the short answer to that question.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll give you a little bit of a rest now, Anna, and hand over to Tommi for some questions about open access and other kinds of publishing. So people were interested to know whether we do it, first of all, and what it involves, what criteria they have to meet, and that kind of thing. So Tommi, do you want to speak a bit about that?
Gladly. So the short answer is yes, we do publish open access. We publish both full books and individual chapters within books in an open access format. The main question behind open access is really the funding of how the publication is paid for. So the traditional model would be that we pay upfront all of the costs for publication, and we slowly, over the course of between 5 and 10 years, normally recoup that investment by selling copies of the book. When we publish a book open access, those or some of those costs need to be paid from other sources, as we cannot necessarily rely on book sales. So the best thing to do would be to contact us. If you contact either Anna or myself and indicate that you're interested in publishing open access, we would then be able to provide you with a straightforward quote for publishing the manuscript or publishing the chapter. When we do publish open access, we will produce the book in the same way as we would produce a normal book. And this goes, most importantly, I would say, to the editorial side of things, in that we will not shortcut the editorial process just because there's open access funding available. It still has to pass our criteria for publication, that it fits our list, and it still has to pass peer review and the revision process. The other thing that's important to say is that we market our open access books in the same way alongside all of our traditional books. We will publish a print version of the book, which we will sell. We'll normally sell that at a reduced price, at least in the first 6 months to a year of publication, because we've had some of the costs already paid for by the open access funding. And so hopefully that makes it not just a little bit more accessible to in the sort of online environment to other countries, but also to students and people who may not be able to normally access the books at our normal sort of £30 a paperback price.
Thanks, Tommy. And then we had a question about self-publishing. Someone asked, is it better to self-publish, and how easy is that, or do it via somewhere else or someone else, traditional publishing?
So self-publication is a very good question. Yes, it is possible. And these days it is very easy to self-publish. You can easily get a manuscript together. You can easily edit it yourself. There's software available that is accessible to anyone. I think we would question, is that really what you want a publisher to do? You could also pay for somebody to relatively cheaply put your book together in a nice format like we do. What you are missing when you self-publish is all of the stages of the editorial process, and all of the stages of the marketing process, and all of the stages of the distribution process. So really, you're just producing a book and putting it online. Now, that's not to say you cannot do that well. You can do that really well, but you have to do all of our jobs as well as we do. And because we have the practice and the experience of publishing 60 plus books per year, we've gotten quite good at it over the years. And so, yes, there are brilliant stories of self-publication and success, but that's the people that put a lot of time and energy into it.
Thanks, Tommy. Back to Anna now. We had a few questions about timescales in publishing. This first one is, how long does the publisher take to accept a publication request?
A note before we talk about timescales is that, again, as with everything, the pandemic has completely slowed everything down, the peer review process in particular. When people ask these questions about timescales, I used to have, little kind of average answers that I gave. But I'm not sure at the moment those average timescales are really holding up. In terms of giving a definite response to a book proposal, we would hope to do it within about 4 to 6 weeks. It very much depends on the time of year. Obviously, coming up to summer holidays, in the Northern Hemisphere, it takes not only are we on holiday, so it takes longer for us to have a meeting internally, but then it takes longer to get responses from our series editors or to get the proposal reviewed if we need to. So I would say 4 to 6 weeks is our normal, but it is longer than that sometimes, depending on external factors, basically.
Great. And when do you think that early career researchers should start thinking about publishing books?
This very much depends, I think. And again, this is a question that you need to consider when you're thinking about publishing a book, particularly your first book, is what are you trying to achieve with your book publication? Obviously, it's nice to have a book, and it's, that's a nice thing to be able to go home and show your mum, and everyone knows what a book is, and all those years you've spent beavering away on your thesis, this is a tangible product that you get to show people. But you need to consider what you're trying to achieve, where you are in your career. So obviously your university will have ideas about what and when you need to be publishing in order for you to progress to the next stage. And that will influence your choice of publisher ultimately, and your choice of format for publication. You may have a brilliant idea, for example, for a textbook, but if your university doesn't count textbooks in their internal kind of marking for promotion, or in the whatever your country's equivalent of the research assessment exercises, then publishing your brilliant idea for a textbook at this time in your career probably isn't the greatest idea for you. In terms of when you're in the process of writing your thesis, as I said earlier, the earlier the better, to be honest. I think almost if you go into doing your research with the idea that you might at some point want to make a book out of this, that allows you to have in your mind all the way through what is the central argument in what I'm doing, how am I going to make this attractive to people from different countries, from different disciplines, from different who use different research methods, and so that allows you to keep your focus a bit beyond just producing your thesis.
Great. And then thinking about edited books, what do you think is a realistic timeline for that?
That's a good question. I think the impression I get, having worked with a lot of people editing books, is that it always takes you longer than you think it's going to. It's, again, I mean, I suppose it's the book editing equivalent of my job, that it's marshalling lots and lots of different people and dealing with all the normal life and work upsets that hold them up from doing their writing. And when you're editing a book, you've got that times 10, I guess, sometimes. So I think it's good when you're thinking about putting together a proposal for an edited book to be realistic about that process, particularly if you're building into your initial editorial process your own peer review process, whether that's getting the chapter authors to review each other's chapters or sending chapters to other people, because that then builds in another layer of potential delays. So I would say the average from us accepting a book proposal for an edited book to having it published is probably about 3 years, somewhere between 3 and 3.5 years, I would say. Obviously, sometimes it happens, everything goes smoothly and it happens faster than that. Occasionally it takes 10 years. But yeah, 3.5 years is a good, sensible average, I would say.
Thanks, Anna. We had a few questions about the different stages of the publication process next. So someone asked, what are the key basic aspects editors are looking at when they're assessing a book proposal?
I mean, there's the obvious stuff, like we will look at your publication history, and for example, if you've never published anything before, no journal papers, no book reviews, you've never given a conference presentation, it's unlikely that we will give you a contract for a book, purely because the experience of writing and of dealing with reviews and editing, it's good to have some of that under your belt before you embark on a book proposal, a book project, sorry. I guess obviously, you know, we look at the bit where you tell us what your book is about and the structure. I suppose things that people might find surprising that we focus on. There's a question on all publishers' book proposal forms. They'll ask you for competing titles. And I think the temptation is to say, oh, there aren't any. My book is completely unique, and that's why you should publish it. And obviously, in a limited way, your book is completely unique. But what we're really asking for when we ask that question is how do you understand where your book fits into the wider research context? So while there may not be a book that focuses on the particular constellation of languages you study in that particular country using your particular research methodology, there will be other books that study trilingualism in different languages, or use that methodology in a trilingual classroom in another country, or focus on the particular kind of theoretical angle that you're looking at, but perhaps with a different age range. So we're really looking for your understanding of how your book fits into the wider research context and into our list as well. So I think people are sometimes misunderstanding the question that we're asking when we ask that question, and the temptation is to say, of course my work is unique, obviously, when that's not really what we're asking you to say. The other things that I think, and kind of because they're at the end of our book proposal form as well, when you've written all the exciting bits, and then we ask you how long is it going to be and when are you going to deliver it, and we get real red flags, I think, from people who are, and again we talked about unrealistic deadlines. You know, people, if someone says they're going to deliver an edited book in 2 months' time, that suggests that they haven't really understood the process, they haven't thought it through. And then you start as a publisher to think, well, what else about this haven't they thought through? The same with someone who says they can rewrite a thesis in 2 months. Again, that suggests that you haven't really thought through the process. And word lengths as well. And I appreciate, particularly if you're a beginning author, it's quite hard when we ask you to come up with a word length for something that you haven't written yet. But if someone says, you know, my book, which is incredibly comprehensive, is only going to be 30,000 words long, that suggests that they haven't really thought it through that carefully. Equally, if you tell me that your book's going to be 300,000 words long, you haven't really looked at many books for a start, but haven't thought about the editing and the condensing process that needs to be done when you're writing a book, because just chucking everything in doesn't really work in terms of writing a book.
Thanks, Anna. There was a question from someone who sent a couple of proposals to a number of publishers and been asked for a sample chapter, and wants to know if that is really a prerequisite for acceptance, or is it just a polite way of saying no?
I don't think so. I think publishers are pretty good about saying no, to be honest. So I wouldn't interpret that as a no. I know some publishers ask for sample chapters almost as routine, to be honest, at proposal stage. We don't. But it can just be an indication. Obviously, I don't know what stage of their career that author's at, but if you are talking about your first book based on your thesis, that may just be an indication that they want you to demonstrate that you've understood the process that you're going to have to go through to make this into a book. It may just be that they, you know, if you've published lots of journal papers and you're proposing a book that's for a slightly more general audience or something like that, they may just want to have a look at your writing style. So I certainly wouldn't interpret it as a no, a polite way of saying no. When we ask for sample chapters, that's very much not what we're saying. I would say it's almost the reverse, actually, that it's a signal of that we're actually engaging with what you're saying, rather than just kind of going, oh yeah, it'll be fine, or no. So yeah, I would definitely persevere with that. I don't think that's a no.
Cool. And then one last one for this section. Could you kind of briefly run through the stages of publication? If your proposal's been accepted and you've got a contract, what happens next?
So you then go away and do the hard bit, which is writing the manuscript, or marshalling your contributors to write the manuscript, which takes, I guess, on average 2 years probably. And it's really, really good. Another top tip is to keep us informed of what's going on. It makes my life so much easier if I know that your book is going to be a year late. Rather than it getting to the, you know, a week before we were supposed to be delivering it and me sending an email going, hey, how's it going? And you go, well, now you ask, it's going to be a year late. So definitely keep in touch with us while you're writing the manuscript. Ask questions as they come up. Again, you know, that's very much what we're here for. No question is a stupid question. So then you submit the manuscript, and it will go out for peer review. If it's in one of our series, then the series editor looks through it, nominates some peer reviewers, and we coordinate sending it out for review. We publish some books outside of the series for various reasons, in which case I or one of my colleagues will find peer reviewers. The peer review process, again, I used to say it took 2 to 3 months. 3 to 4 months at the moment is more realistic, and some books are taking longer than that. It's a real struggle to find people with the time and energy to peer review at the moment for obvious reasons. You will get back a set of peer reviews and sometimes commentary from the series editors as well, particularly if the peer reviews disagree. The series editors will step in and say, well, you know, I think reviewer 2 has a point here, but you can ignore that thing that reviewer 1 said. They obviously, you know, misunderstood what you were doing. We then negotiate a length of time for you to make revisions to your manuscript. That very much depends on what else you've got going on, to be honest. We're quite happy to negotiate with that. Again, I would say the average time is probably 2 or 3 months. But again, you know, if you get 2 reviews that are incredibly glowing and really just say you need to clarify something in the introduction, then it might only take you a couple of weeks. If you've got to do really substantial revisions to most of your chapters, then it might be more like 6 or 7 months. What you then send me what hopefully is the final manuscript, and we ask you to send a document responding to the reviews along with that. I send that to the series editors. They look at your response to the review, look through your revised manuscript. And at that point, I'm then starting to hand information over to my colleagues. So Flo will be getting in touch with you about the cover design, and we'll be starting to think about blurbs and starting to get information out to the book trade. Assuming everything is okay with your revised manuscript, I hand it over to my colleagues for production. And the production process takes about 6 months, 7 months, depending on how much we've got going through the system. And you will then work with copy editors and with our colleague Sarah to produce a book.
Great.
And then marketing, I shouldn't forget marketing. The entire marketing department is sat looking at me going, excuse me. So while your book is in production, and then afterwards, you will then work with the marketing department. We've been doing lots of author events while we can't go to conferences. So this kind of event, but talking to our authors. They give you leaflets and discount codes to share on your social media. You suggest review journals for review. So there's all of that going on behind the scenes when your book is in production, and then after publication as well.
Nice save, Anna.
Dug myself out of that hole.
Yeah, so then we had a bunch of questions which didn't quite fit into any of the previous topic areas. So I'm going to go through those one by one. This first one for Tommi. Are there any aspects publishers from different countries or languages focus on when publishing a new book? And does the process change?
That's a really good question. And my honest answer is that I don't know for certain. I would say that there are definitely differences in different countries in publishing in the English language. US publishers tend to be a lot more US focused for the simple reason that they have a very big audience in their own country. So they don't tend to need to look globally to sell copies. So they are really good at, they're better than most international publishers at selling within the US. Going to a global market, they're usually not so good on that because they don't have to be. In Europe, I would say that the British and the Dutch and the German publishers, there probably are some minor differences between us, but in terms of the sort of European academic presses, we're reasonably comparative. It's probably more accurate to say that there are differences between the presses themselves than which countries they're based on. And then I would guess in terms of the languages that it's a similar question to the countries, that you would need to look at what is being published in, for example, Finnish. A Finnish publisher might well publish about a global audience, but there aren't going to be many Finnish speakers that can read academic Finnish text in the sort of global audience. So they're probably going to have a much more domestic based market. And for a definitive answer on that, I would ask the publishers in the country and the language that you're interested, but that's my best guess.
Thanks, Tommi. Over to Anna for this one. Someone asked, does contributing a book chapter count in academic publishing?
It depends is the answer to that. It depends on the publisher who published the book. And so we peer review everything. And most university presses will peer review everything as well. And as far as I'm aware, most universities will then count the book chapter if it's been in a publication that has been peer reviewed. If you're publishing with a publisher that doesn't peer review edited books, then I think you might have issues. So if that's an issue for you, I think you need to check the peer review policy of the publisher that's going to be publishing the book, and then your university's policy on edited book chapters. But as far as I'm aware, we spend quite a lot of time writing letters for chapter authors to prove that their publication was peer reviewed. So certainly lots of universities count our publications as publications.
Thanks, Anna. I think we're just going to jump in with a few of the live questions now, just because I'm aware of the time, and we'll come back to the other ones if we've got time at the end. But Tommi, maybe you could answer this one. Eleanor Bashir is interested in making research accessible to people who cannot afford to buy expensive publications, and is wondering if we're doing anything to help in this area, apart from open access.
So that is a really good question, and one that we quite honestly have been struggling with and trying to find answers for. I've been in this industry for 20 plus years, and my parents before that, we have struggled with it, and we have costs of running a business in the UK which have to be covered, and we are very aware that our customers cannot necessarily pay those prices. We've tried various things in the past, like selling the rights to local publishers to publish low price reprints of the books, and often those then get sold into the American market as there are no restrictions. And so there is no straight answer to it. I think open access is one possible answer, and I think we are doing our best to, when we publish open access, to publish a paperback much cheaper than we would on the traditional model for at least the first year. And I'm very aware that even if we publish it at £10, that's probably still too expensive for some countries. We work with charities like Book Aid International, but we don't have a full answer to that, other than we will keep trying. And if you have any ideas, please contact me directly, and I would love to talk about them.
Thanks, Tommi. This one is about the review process. Maybe Anna, you could answer this for Victoria Odeni, who asks, does NM find peer reviewers, or are potential authors expected to recommend or find reviewers themselves?
We do it, is the short answer. Very occasionally, if because of the subject area we work in, it's a relatively small subject area, and particularly for edited books, sometimes you will look at an edited book manuscript and think literally everyone I could think of who I might ask to review this book has a chapter in it. So then very occasionally we will go back to the book authors and say, you know, do you have any suggestions? But 99% of the time we find people ourselves, because it's useful for us to have a balance of reviewers as well, and with the best will in the world, I think sometimes if you everybody is human, and if you suggest your own peer reviewers, you suggest people who will get your book.
Mm-hmm. And maybe you could also answer this one from Melissa Halber-Ozer, sorry if I mispronounced that, who asks, is there an expectation to cite or build on existing MM titles in a proposal and eventual manuscript?
No, there's not an expectation. I guess, again, because it's quite a small field and we are one of the leading publishers in it, I think it sometimes strikes us a bit odd if none of our books are mentioned in the proposal, or I can't remember a book where none of our publications have been cited in the book. But there's certainly no expectation. I mean, if you're coming to us, you know, from a completely new angle, and the works that you're citing are from outside of applied linguistics, then there's no, you know, you're not going to be penalised for not sticking a couple of our books on the book proposal, certainly. Yeah.
Thanks. Just going back to our original list of questions now for a second. Tommi, someone has asked if the publishing job market for new international student applicants has changed since COVID.
That's a really good question. I think the answer is yes, it probably has. We are too small a publisher really to be able to say how the larger publishers have changed in their hiring practices. Certainly it's easier to do interviews by Zoom than it is by, so if you are applying for a job in a publisher that is in a different country to yourself, at the moment most recruiters are purely doing online interviews, so that is much easier than committing to travel to an interview where that publisher is based. I think that's the simple answer really, is it has changed a little bit. There probably will be a lot more jobs on the market, I would suspect, as a lot of publishers are expanding a little bit.
Mm-hmm. And we touched on this a little bit earlier, but Tommi, is there any separate policy to promote publications from the Global South, as Global South countries seem to have their own challenges?
I would say in terms of promoting books from the Global South, we tend to promote all of our books in the same way. We believe in them all together, and we tend to promote them to all countries globally. We touched on the pricing issue, which is a real problem. I'd say we are trying online to do various things, but also I'd say we are trying to think very carefully about our commissioning and editorial processes. I don't know whether, Anna, you want to say a little bit about that, as getting the material that is Global South originated is just as important as promoting it.
Yeah, I think we're keen that this isn't just a trend that obviously everyone is talking about and publishing about, decolonization and stuff at the moment. And I think we're keen that we don't just jump on that bandwagon for a couple of years and then move on to the next thing. I think there are a couple of key things that we're focusing on while recognizing that, as with everyone else, we're far from perfect. One is trying to promote and publish new forms of writing, because obviously there's limited value in going, oh yes, we're keen to publish authors from the Global South, but they have to write in such a way that mimics and conforms to Western writing traditions, and that applies to authors from the Global North as well. I'm really focused on trying to get authors from the Global South, but to make sure that we have series editors as well, because obviously they're in that gatekeeping position. It would be very easy for us to just say, let's get lots of peer reviewers from countries in the Global South, but obviously that's we do pay our peer reviewers, but you're essentially working for free. And I think it's really important to have authors, but to try and have people in gatekeeping positions as well who are from the Global South, and they are aware of those issues in a way that, with the best will in the world, it's very difficult for us to be. A couple of our series now specify that if you're submitting an edited book proposal, it's not okay to just have chapters from North America or just have chapters from Europe, that you have to get some authors and some perspectives from the Global South within your edited book, which is really useful. And again, I think it just comes down as well to just being supportive and encouraging and recognising, which I hope we do for all our authors, the particular challenges that people face within their lives and their careers, and trying to be supportive and not make people conform to our ideas of how things should be done, and when things should be done. But it's an ongoing process, obviously, for all of us. And again, if you have ideas, suggestions, things that you think we could or should do better, please do get in touch with us.
Thanks, Anna and Tommi. I'm quite aware of the time, so maybe just like a sort of quick fire round of the remaining questions might be good. We've had a few about edited books. Victoria Odney asks another question. How interested is in edited volumes, and are they popular?
They are, yes. And I think in some ways edited volumes give you the opportunity to take a much wider view of a subject than a single author monograph. Yeah, I mean, without looking off the top of my head, I would say probably over 50% of the books we publish are edited collections. Again, yeah, very, very happy to discuss them. Yes, this is your time.
Thanks. And kind of a follow-up, are publishers involved in calls for chapters and edited volumes, and how does that process work?
We're not, no. I think there are some publishers that do work with the book author to put out calls for papers. The only way I get involved in that is if someone approaches me with an idea, and it's clearly an idea that's interesting, and I know they do a good job of it. I occasionally say, you need to go away and put out a call for chapters, get some contributors. But if you want to say something like, Multilingual Matters have expressed an interest in looking at the proposal or whatever, then that's fine. I'm quite happy for people to do that.
Tommi, Someone asked, they were curious to know how many titles focused on tourism in Southeast Asia, and is there a good opportunity to publish in that area?
Again, very quick answer. Our colleague on the editorial side of the tourism list isn't in the office this week, but yes, there are a number of titles on Southeast Asia, and it's a very good market. It's a well-studied tourism market, so please send us your proposal. It's an opportunity.
Thanks. And a question from Esma Babai. Apologies again for the pronunciation. Maybe Anna, you could answer this one. How might authors determine which series to submit to, and how to know whether a publisher is a good fit for their work?
In terms of the publisher, you really need to look at their website, I guess, and look at the types of books they publish. For example, if you want to publish a handbook, we wouldn't be the right publisher. I don't think we've really ever published one. Then start looking at the authors they're publishing. You know, are they people whose work aligns with yours? Once you get down to series editors, really just looking at the books within the series, and then the series editors, you know, are they going to be receptive to the type of work that you're doing? Some series editors really love ethnography, some don't. So it's that kind of thing. But also, again, to emphasize that, you know, on the book proposal, there's a question of which series your book fits into. It's not like the end of the world. So quite often people will suggest a series, I'll read through it and go, no, actually, I think it's a different series. Or we'll send it to the series editors that they suggest, and the series editors will say, this is really good. I don't think it's for my series, but you might want to try that other series. So so have a look, but again, it's not a you've not made a terrible error if you put the wrong one down. It's everything's changeable.
So time for 2 more questions, I think, just quickly. Someone asked, is it possible for someone like me who is not in academia anymore but works in the field of multilingualism to publish with MM?
Yes.
Yes, great. As simple as that.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, no, there's no bar to people who aren't working in academia, not at all. No.
Great, thank you. And then the one last question, I think, just to finish up. Oh, sorry, lost it. It's for both of you. What would be your top advice for someone publishing for the first time?
Want to go first?
I would say, whatever your issue is, talk to us. I find it very frustrating sometimes when I hear people say, my publisher won't do this. And you say, well, you haven't asked us. It might be that we say, no, we can't do it. But then we'll give you a reason and hopefully you'll understand that. But absolutely, just talk to us. We love communicating with people. Don't be afraid of rejection. Talk to us.
Anna, do you want to add anything?
First, because that's what I was going to say. I suppose related to that, yeah, ask questions. There are no stupid questions. I think it's really easy when you work in an industry to assume that the reasons why you do the things you do and say the things you say are obvious, but actually, if you're not within that industry, it's often not obvious. So ask questions, yeah, and just talk to us. It's what we're here for. We're as bored as everyone is sitting at home typing emails to people. So, you know, please do talk to us.
Ultimately, we're a community-based publisher. We are publishing for you, and so if we don't know what you want, we will try and do the right thing by everybody if we can make it work.
Yeah. Great. Thanks so much, both of you. And I think that's probably all we've got time for today. Thanks very much for joining us and submitting all your questions. They were really interesting. If you have any further queries, you can email Anna at anna@multilingual-matters.com and she'll be happy to answer them. And you can also get 50% off all our books until 15th of August when you enter the discount code YPQA50 on our website, www.multilingual-matters.com. And the recording of the event will also be posted on our YouTube channel. So if you know anyone who couldn't make it to the event, but it might be relevant to, please do feel free to share that with them. Thanks very much and have a great rest of your day.